There are moments in history when a single sentence buried deep inside an ancient book can illuminate more truth than entire volumes of debate. In our previous episode, we uncovered Josephus's famous reference to Jesus in Antiquities Book 18, the passage known as the Testimonium Flavianum. It sparked centuries of discussion, controversy, and revelation. And yet, as powerful as that first mention is, it's not the only one, because hidden deeper inside Josephus's work lies a second reference, a reference almost no one talks about. Shorter, sharper, more historically undeniable, and far more dangerous to the arguments of skeptics. This second mention is not about Jesus directly, but about his brother, a man Josephus calls James, the brother of Jesus who was called Christ. Now, pause for a moment and really consider that. A Jewish historian, writing under Roman authority, records the name of James and anchors his identity to Jesus. Not myth, not legend, not symbolism, but as a real historical brother of a real historical man called Christ. And this time, unlike the debated passage in Book 18, there is no controversy, no argument, no dispute. Even secular historians accept the authenticity of this line. Why? Because its tone is neutral, its language is typical Josephus, and the context around it is unmistakably historical. So the question we're exploring today is not just, did Josephus write about Jesus? We asked that in episode 1. Today we ask something far deeper. Why did Josephus mention Jesus twice? Why would a man who never followed him, never worshipped him, never believed in him, still write his name into history not once but twice, and tie a major legal event in Jerusalem to his own brother? You are watching Jesus Affirmations, and in this episode, we're going to uncover one of the most overlooked yet most explosive pieces of historical evidence in all of ancient literature. Evidence that most people, believers and skeptics alike, have never heard, never studied, and never realized was sitting quietly inside Josephus's manuscripts for nearly 2,000 years. You and I are going to walk through who James was, why his death mattered, why Josephus documented it, and what it reveals about the early Christian movement that even Rome couldn't erase. But before we go deeper, I want to ask you something. If a historian who didn't follow Jesus still recorded the existence of his brother, if a man loyal to Rome still acknowledged the early Christian community as a real historical group, if someone who lived within just one generation of the crucifixion documented the impact of Jesus' family on Jewish leadership, then what does that say about the truth we've inherited? What does it say about the reach of Jesus' name? What does it reveal about the power of a movement that survived the destruction of its homeland, the fall of its temple, and the armies of an empire? Because here is the revelation at the heart of this episode. Josephus didn't just mention Jesus twice because he happened to be writing history. He mentioned him twice because the impact of Jesus' life and the lives of those closest to him was impossible to ignore. Today we're going to explore how Josephus's second reference may be the earliest secular proof not only that Jesus existed, but that his followers were already a recognized, disruptive, and influential movement in Jerusalem. By the end of this episode, you will see why this single sentence from Antiquities Book 20 stands as one of the most important extra-biblical confirmations of the New Testament, and why history itself, even when written by the enemies of the gospel, could not remain silent. Because the world tried to silence his voice, yet even the historian of his enemies wrote his brother's name in stone. In the world of historical research, some discoveries become famous overnight, quoted in documentaries, debated in universities, and repeated in sermons. But others, equally powerful, sit in the shadows, ignored, misunderstood, or deliberately pushed aside. That's exactly what happened with Josephus's second reference to Jesus. Most people know about the Testimonium Flavianum in Book 18, the first mention, but almost no one talks about the reference in Book 20, even though it is far more historically secure. This is the problem. The public has been given an incomplete picture of the evidence. The conversation about Jesus' historicity often centers around the one passage that has controversy, while the passage that is universally accepted is left buried, overlooked, or simply unmentioned. Why? Because if people actually knew what Josephus wrote about James, the brother of Jesus, skeptics would lose one of their strongest arguments. The pain point is this. Most people don't realize that the earliest secular affirmation of Jesus' existence comes not from a debated passage, but from this second, unaltered, undisputed one. Let's break the problem down clearly. Skeptics often argue that Jesus never existed. They claim Jesus is myth, legend, a religious invention, or a symbolic figure created by early Christians. But Josephus destroys that argument in a single sentence. James, the brother of Jesus, who was called Christ. This isn't interpretation. This isn't theology. This is genealogy. Pure, dry, historical fact. You cannot have a brother unless the person is real. Most people only know the debated passage. Because Book 18 has Christian-sounding lines, critics focus all their energy on dismissing that one. But the Book 20 mention has no Christian additions, and every historian knows it. Yet few pastors preach it, few teachers highlight it, few documentaries include it. And so millions of people grow up hearing the wrong conversation, fighting over the wrong evidence, while the strongest proof remains hidden in plain sight. When believers don't know the full historical support for their faith, they can feel unprepared in debates or shaken by arguments online. A young Christian hears a YouTube skeptic say Jesus is just a myth, and they panic, unaware that the strongest historical proof is sitting untouched inside Josephus's Book 20. Imagine if the global church understood. There is an undisputed, secular, first-century historian who recorded the existence of Jesus' brother. That would silence many lies before they could spread. If we overlook this second mention, if we allow it to remain hidden in scholarly circles only, then we're missing a key that unlocks the credibility of the entire New Testament. Because the death of James, which Josephus records, matches perfectly with early Christian accounts. Two independent sources, one Christian, one secular, describing the same event. This is the kind of historical alignment scholars dream of. When this knowledge stays buried, Christians lose a powerful weapon of truth, and skeptics gain room to manipulate doubt. Imagine being a believer who never knew this. Maybe you've been that person. Someone questioned your faith, and you wished you had more historical grounding. Someone mocked the Gospels, and you wished you could respond with confidence. Someone said Jesus was a myth, and deep inside, a part of you wondered how to answer. If that's you, you're not alone. Millions have been left without this knowledge, not because the evidence is weak, but because the evidence was never taught. But today, that changes. Research confirms the truth. Even historians who are not Christians agree on this point. Scholars like Bart Ehrman, a skeptical agnostic, affirm that the Book 20 reference is genuine. Jewish historians confirm it. Secular scholars confirm it. Roman-era experts confirm it. This is the earliest non-Christian text to say plainly, Jesus was a real person. He had a real brother, his followers were real, and his movement was influential enough to reshape Jerusalem's politics. Ignoring this isn't just an oversight, it's a tragedy.
because this forgotten reference holds the power to strengthen faith, silence critics, and reveal the truth in a way few historical texts ever could.
When a historical question is surrounded by confusion, misunderstanding, or controversy, the best solution is not more argument, it is clarity. And that clarity often comes from a source that is simple, unembellished, and undeniable. That is exactly what Josephus's second mention of Jesus gives us. A solution to doubt, a solution to debate, a solution to the question skeptics keep asking: where is the secular evidence for Jesus? The answer has been sitting quietly in Antiquities Book 20 for nearly 2,000 years. And remarkably, the solution isn't theological, emotional, or spiritual. It's historical, it's factual, and it is universally accepted, even by those who do not believe the gospel. The solution begins with the simplicity of Josephus's words. Josephus writes, almost casually, James, the brother of Jesus, who was called Christ. This line solves many problems in a single stroke. No poetic language, no religious claims, no supernatural events. Just a historian identifying one man based on the fame of another. This solves the core issue. You cannot have a brother of a myth. If James existed, and Josephus clearly says he did, then Jesus must also have existed. It becomes the simplest, cleanest, most historically grounded solution to the debate. The second mention solves the reliability question. One of the biggest challenges believers face is the accusation that early Christians made everything up. But the Book 20 reference isn't written by a Christian. It isn't written in the New Testament. It isn't even favorable to Christians. This mention is buried in the middle of a political story about law, leadership, and corruption in Jerusalem. Josephus wasn't even trying to talk about Jesus. He only mentioned his name because it helped identify which James was being executed. That's the power of it. Josephus wrote it with zero religious motivation. And when secular historians examine this passage, they say something astonishing. This is undoubtedly genuine. Because Josephus had no reason to exaggerate, promote, or defend Christianity. He was simply recording events. The solution also gives strength to believers. When Christians learn about this second mention, something changes. Suddenly their faith gains a historical anchor. They realize that the Gospels are not floating in myth. They are rooted in real events acknowledged by the very historian who served Rome. This gives believers confidence in conversations, debates, and internal struggles. It strengthens their worldview. It confirms that Jesus' life left such an impact that even his enemies recorded the evidence. Here is where the solution becomes even more powerful. Across the academic world, Bart Ehrman, agnostic, calls it extremely valuable and unquestionably authentic. Louis Feldman, Jewish historian, affirms its accuracy. John Meyer, Paula Fredrickson, Gesa Vermes, and countless others agree. This is one of the strongest secular proofs of Jesus' historical existence. These are not pastors, not apologists, not defenders of Christianity. They are scholars, many of whom do not believe in the resurrection, yet they affirm the authenticity of Josephus' second mention. This level of agreement across belief systems is rare. It highlights the unique strength of this passage. And what makes this solution stand apart? It's the uniqueness of the reference. Most ancient mentions of Jesus are short, are vague, are written decades later, come from hostile sources. But Josephus' second mention has something none of the others have: a direct family connection, a clear name, a precise relationship, and it fits perfectly with the Book of Acts, early church history, and multiple Christian sources. This gives it incredible historical weight. So what does this actually offer us? Certainty where there was once confusion, strength of faith where there was once doubt,
A historically grounded Jesus, not just a theological one. Proof that even his enemies documented his movement. A clearer understanding of how Christianity spread despite resistance. And most importantly, it gives you confidence that the gospel did not grow in silence. The world noticed. And Josephus recorded the evidence without meaning to. That's the value of this forgotten second mention.
As we close this episode, step back for a moment and look at the full picture. Not with the eyes of debate, but with the clarity of history itself. A Jewish historian, working for Rome, documenting the political chaos of Jerusalem. Uninterested in Christian theology, unaffected by Christian belief, unmoved by Christian claims. Yet twice, not once, twice, he writes the name of Jesus into the official record of Jewish history. The first mention in Book 18 shows the world trying to interpret him. The second mention in Book 20 shows the world trying to suppress the people who followed him. And in between those lines, we see something remarkable. That the impact of Jesus' life was so large, so real, and so unavoidable that even the historian of the empire that crucified him could not avoid mentioning him. Not as a myth, not as a symbol, but as a real man with a real family and real followers. Followers who were influential enough to anger the leaders of Jerusalem. James, the brother of Jesus, stood boldly for the faith, and Josephus, without intending to, preserved his legacy. In one simple sentence, he gave the world a secular confirmation that the early Christian community existed, suffered, and persisted even in the face of deadly opposition. This second mention matters because it is untouched, unedited, and undisputed. It stands as a quiet pillar of truth, reminding us that the gospel story didn't grow in isolation. It grew under pressure and still spread. It grew under persecution and still survived. It grew under an empire and still rose above it. And today, nearly 2,000 years later, it is Josephus, the historian who never followed Jesus, who leaves us with the final confirmation. Jesus lived. Jesus influenced. Jesus left a movement no power could erase. So as we end this episode, let this truth settle in your heart. The world tried to silence his voice, yet even the historian of his enemies wrote his brother's name in stone. If you found this episode meaningful, let your voice echo that same truth. Share it, comment your thoughts, and continue this journey with us as we uncover more forgotten evidence, more broken fragments, more surprising confirmations that history, no matter how hard it tried, could not bury the Christ. Until the next episode, stay curious, stay grounded, and stay faithful.